In a world vast and unforgiving, where the line between life and death is a single breath, we find ourselves on a remote desert island. The sun beats down on the endless stretch of sand, with the vast ocean stretching beyond the horizon. Among the rolling waves, a young woman lies motionless on the shore, her body cradled by a life jacket. This is Jen, a survivor of an unknown catastrophe. As the tide laps at her feet, Jen stirs, slowly regaining consciousness. Her disorientation is quickly overshadowed by panic as she spots her friend Brad lying nearby, unconscious. Jen's heart races as she scrambles to his side. Turning him over, her eyes widen in horror. Embedded in Brad's abdomen is a jagged piece of coral. His breathing is shallow, his life hanging by a thread. Driven by a desperate need to save him, Jen screams for help, but the relentless roar of the ocean swallows her voice. With no one to turn to, she removes her life vest and backpack, dragging Brad further inland, away from the water's edge. With trembling hands, she pulls the coral from Brad's stomach, blood gushing from the wound. She tears off her scarf, pressing it against his injury, trying to staunch the bleeding. Realizing he needs water, she ventures into the nearby woods, where the towering trees and thick underbrush create a canopy of shadows. After a frantic search, she finds a coconut, using a rock to crack it open. Hurrying back to Brad, she tilts his head and pours the coconut water into his mouth. But it's too late. Brad's chest is still, and his skin is pale. Jen calls his name, shaking him, but he's gone. Her grief is overwhelming, a crushing weight that leaves her sobbing on the sand, clutching his lifeless face. The island, their unforeseen prison, is a small strip of beach surrounded by dense, impenetrable forest. Overcome by sorrow, Jen wanders the island, completing a full circle back to where Brad lies. Determined to survive, she knows she must push forward. Delving into the jungle, she stumbles upon a clearing where a bag hangs from a tree and a red cooler sits on the ground. Hopeful that someone else might be there, she calls out, but her only answer is the whisper of the wind through the trees. Investigating further, she finds the bag's contents, a medicine bottle dated 1994, a sign that whoever was here before is long gone. In the cooler, she discovers a few bottles of Coca-Cola, untouched for years. She leaves them behind, searching for a thermos and a small metal box. Inside the box are a deck of cards, a pack of matches, and a few other odds and ends. Nearby, she finds an abandoned tent, half covered by vines, with a backpack containing an old Game Boy, a car radio, a book, and a teddy bear. These remnants of past lives only deepen her sense of isolation. Returning to the beach, she hears a rustling noise coming from a hollow tree. Investigating, she discovers it's just a tropical bird, its feathers a splash of color against the dull browns and greens of the forest. She gathers leaves to cover Brad's body, taking one last look around before the sun begins to set. The sky darkens, and rain begins to pour down in torrents. Jen seeks shelter under the leaves she's gathered, using her jacket as a makeshift cover. The night is long, cold, and filled with the sound of the rain pounding the earth. Morning arrives, and with it, a grim discovery. While scavenging along the beach, Jen finds a few small fish that had washed ashore, and further along, a dead shark split clean in half. Its body bears deep, mysterious wounds, as if something large and dangerous lurks beneath the waves. She stares out at the sea, fear tightening in her chest as she wonders what could have caused such injuries. Attempting to clean the fish with a flat stone, she struggles with the task, her frustration growing until she gives up, returning to the cooler to sit with her meager belongings. As she settles down, she opens her diary, only to find that the rain has washed away the ink, leaving the pages blank. Her memories, once documented, are now lost. Among the ruined pages, she finds a photograph of herself and her boyfriend, the image a painful reminder of happier times. Later, while exploring deeper into the jungle, Jen stumbles upon another clearing. Here, she discovers a burial site. 3 graves, marked with simple stones, evidence of those who came before her. The sight sends a chill down her spine, a grim reminder of her own mortality. She returns to the beach, the sun now low in the sky, casting long shadows across the sand. Brad's body, now beginning to decompose, fills the air with a sickening stench. Jen knows she must do something, and with great effort, she drags him closer to the forest, digging a shallow grave with her bare hands. She lays him to rest, marking the spot with a piece of wood bearing the initial of his name. Night falls again, and Jen, exhausted and emotionally drained, prepares a small fire. She roasts one of the fish she found earlier, the taste bland but nourishing. It's her first night alone on the island, and as the fire crackles, she feels the crushing weight of solitude. The next morning, Jen awakens to a horrifying sight. Brad's grave has been disturbed, his body dragged away, mutilated. Panic surges through her as she realizes that something or someone has taken him. Grabbing a piece of wood, she sharpens it into a makeshift spear, her only line of defense against the unknown predator. She spends the day on edge, her eyes constantly scanning the trees for any sign of movement. But nothing comes. The night is eerily quiet, and Jen remains on high alert, her heart pounding at every rustle of leaves or snap of a twig. The following day, Jen spots something in the distance, bobbing on the waves. She decides to swim out to investigate, her limbs heavy with fear and exhaustion. When she reaches the object, she finds it's a bucket and a suitcase floating aimlessly in the water. Daring to dive deeper, she notices a dark, ominous hole in the ocean floor, a black abyss that sends a shiver down her spine. Gathering the bucket and suitcase, she swims back to the beach, where she opens the suitcase to find a pair of sneakers and some clothes. That night, her third on the island, she changes into the new clothes, hoping they will provide some warmth as she sits by the fire. As she tries to examine the contents of the metal box again, using the flickering firelight, she hears the faint hum of an airplane engine. Hope surges within her, and she rushes to grab the flare gun she found earlier. She fires it into the sky, watching as the flare arcs upward, glowing brightly against the darkening sky. But as the flare disappears into the distance, Jen's heart sinks. There is no response, no rescue. Then, from the corner of her eye, she sees it, a humanoid figure emerging from the water, its silhouette monstrous against the night sky. Terror grips her as she realizes this is the creature that has been stalking her, the one that took Brad's body. She bolts into the jungle, clutching her spear, finding a place to hide among the thick underbrush. She listens, her breath shallow, as the monster's footsteps draw closer. The creature rustles the leaves, its heavy breathing audible. But after a tense moment, it turns and retreats back to the water. When daylight returns, Jen cautiously emerges from her hiding spot, her body trembling with fear and exhaustion. She retrieves the photos from the metal box, scrutinizing them closely. The images show a family, but in the last photo, something strange catches her eye. 2 shining dots in the background, eerily similar to the creature's eyes she saw the night before. Determined to escape the island, Jen hatches a plan. She empties the suitcase, placing Brad's life jacket inside, and tries to fashion it into a makeshift raft. But despite her efforts, the raft won't hold her weight. Frustrated and desperate, she throws the life jacket and the suitcase back onto the beach. That night, she takes refuge inside the hollow tree, clutching her spear as she tries to sleep. But sleep does not come easy. At some point during the night, she hears the creature again, its presence unmistakable. it approaches the tree, rolling it with Jen still inside. She bites her lip, holding back a scream, and miraculously the creature eventually loses interest and moves on. The morning brings little solace. Jen catches a small shark using the fish she gathered as bait. As the fifth night approaches, she uses the shark as bait, hoping to draw the creature out and finally confront it. She hides nearby, watching the shark hanging from a tree branch, waiting for the monster to appear. But as she closes her eyes for a moment, exhaustion overcoming her, she wakes to find the shark gone, the ropes that held it torn apart. The next morning, she spots something floating in the water again. Approaching it cautiously, she discovers it's a human body, cut in half and horribly mutilated. The sight makes her stomach churn, but she knows she must use it to her advantage. She hangs the body in the same spot where the shark was, hoping it will lure the monster out once more. That night, her sixth on the island, she hides and waits, her heart pounding in her chest. The monster returns. As the morning sun rises, Jen limps down to the beach, washing away the blood and grime from her recent battle with a terrifying sea monster. Exhausted, she changes into fresh clothes, only to spot an inflatable raft with a tent slowly approaching the island. Unable to believe her eyes, she swims towards it, discovering two other survivors from the shipwreck, her boyfriend, Lucas Griffin, and her friend, Mia Reed. Overcome with relief, Jen embraces Lucas, who reassures her that everything will be fine now. They settle on the beach, where Jen prepares breakfast, even treating them to a 20-year-old soda she found. While they admire the beauty of the island, Jen warns them about the lurking danger beneath the water. But Lucas, dismissive, asks her to calm down, calling her dear. Jen tells them about the sea monster and the deadly black hole that drags its victims to the ocean's depths. Despite her vivid descriptions and the horrifying story of their friend Zach's gruesome fate, Lucas and Mia remain skeptical. Mia, however, is intrigued by the graves on the island, wondering who buried the bodies. As they discuss their situation, Jen insists they must leave the island before nightfall, fearing the monster's return. Lucas refuses, insisting it's safer to stay and wait for rescue. Growing desperate, Jen devises a plan to escape without them. Later, as her friends let their guard down, she packs supplies and sneaks towards the raft. But Lucas and Mia catch on and chase her down. A struggle ensues, with Mia knocking Jen out. When Jen regains consciousness, it's already dark, and she's tied to a tree. Mia apologizes for hitting her, but still doesn't believe Jen's warnings. As Lucas joins them, assuring them there are no monsters in the jungle, Mia wanders off, only to find the mutilated remains of a fish on the beach. Back at the camp, tensions rise as Lucas lashes out at Jen, blaming her for their predicament. Jen tries to convince him to release her, but he refuses, confident she can't survive without him. Their argument is cut short by Mia's desperate screams. The monster has returned. Lucas rushes to help, but arrives too late. The creature drags Mia into the water, leaving Lucas and Jen helpless. The next morning, the two survivors prepare to leave the island. As they set sail, Jen notices the raft is stained with blood. But before she can confront Lucas, the sea monster attacks. Despite their best efforts to fend it off, the creature drags Lucas into the ocean's black hole, leaving Jen alone and devastated. With no other choice, Jen returns to the island, where she prepares for a final showdown with the monster. As night falls, she lures the creature into a trap, setting it ablaze. A fierce battle ensues, with Jen desperately fighting for her life. In the end, she manages to defeat the monster, decapitating it as the island burns around her. As dawn breaks, a battered and exhausted Jen limps towards the raft, carrying the monster's head as proof of her ordeal. The island, now in flames, serves as a beacon of hope, a signal that might finally lead to her rescue.